What's Your Work Fit is sponsored by Hudson Davis. Start your brand's marketing and communications journey today at hudsondaviscommunications.com. I'm Dan Smolin. I built a successful executive career in marketing and communications before becoming a top headhunter and founding my own executive search firm. Now get this, every day, mainstream media runs stories in which old school bosses and thought leaders frame your work and workplace issues in ways that are often divisive and unmeaningful. And that's just crazy. The time has come for you to answer the question, what's your work fit? So that your work and career fit who you are, how you want to live, and what you want your lasting contributions to be. What's your work fit? It answers your questions and tackles the issues that keep you up at night about advancing your career in this time of workplace revolution. So let's get started. Hey, good day, everyone. Dan Smolin here from What's Your Work Fit. I hope you're having a good and successful day. To everyone who's following us on the LinkedIn stream, I apologize for the brief technical difficulties. I think you got to us a few seconds late, so hopefully that's not a problem and you're watching us without any difficulty. So thank you. And thank you to all of you who support this live show. We couldn't have scaled it without you. And if you are new to this experience and you want to subscribe, let me point you to where you can find us. We are on LinkedIn at What's Your Work Fit. You just go to that page, hit the follow button with the plus sign on it, and you'll be connected to us and you'll be aware of all future programming that comes to the fore. Same thing on Facebook Live. You can follow us there, and also on our What's Your Work Fit YouTube channel. You can subscribe by hitting that black oval button. One more ask. If you enjoy what you are seeing on What's Your Work Fit, please tell 5 friends. Point them to the platform of their choice. And that's how we build a community intent on finding their work fit. So thank you again. I couldn't do this show without you. Okay, we've got a great show today and a wonderful guest. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Jessica Weiss. Hi, Jessica. How are you?
Hi, Dan. I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us today. Let me tell you a little bit about Jessica. She is a globally recognized speaker, coach, and consultant who teaches people and businesses how to find more happiness, fulfillment, and satisfaction at work. Great gig.
I like it.
So tell us a little more about the work that you do. I know that you have some pretty big brands that you support. What is it that attracts them to your value proposition?
So when I work with big Fortune 500 companies, so I work with like the Coca-Colas, Unilever, Citibank, American Express, those kinds of companies. Generally, when they bring me in, it's in the context of how can we get a more resilient, more engaged, more connected teams? How can we equip our teams with this like performance edge that everybody's looking for, right? Because the world of work is crazy. Everything's moving at an insane speed. So what can we give to our teams beyond the obvious, right? And what I say is happiness is the glue that holds all of that together.
Wow.
Happiness is the key to unlocking engagement and efficiency and connectedness and innovation and creativity and all of that stuff. So they bring me in for that reason, really to kind of maximize and equip their teams.
Very good. That kind of gets us to our viewer question, and it is from Bree L. Hey, Bree L. She works at a company with a considerable amount of workplace flexibility. And yet she says that she's noticed that her coworkers seem a bit rattled when she engages with them in person or virtually. She says that they often express a weariness, if you will, throughout the day. Brielle reads countless studies that show that career professionals like having more flexibility in the day and where they get to work. But on the other hand, she's taken by other research studies indicating that worker contentment and engagement are at historic lows. So, Brielle doesn't want to jump to conclusions, Jessica, but she asks, does more workplace flexibility make us less happy? What do you
Okay.
think?
So that's a great question. And of course, there's not really one answer to it. So, in keeping with this idea about all of these studies, right? There's loads of studies that are telling us that flexibility in work gives us more agency, gives us more autonomy, and hopefully gives us more happiness. There's
Mhm,
even one study that just came out of Stanford that said those people who opt to work in a hybrid work environment are willing to give up 7 to 10% of their salary
mhm,
to take that flexibility. So, there is definitely a piece of the flexibility argument that says yes, people who work remotely or people who work in a hybrid kind of situation are more satisfied with their work because of that flexibility. But there is another side to that coin. And
mhm,
a key component of workplace satisfaction, and something that I talk about constantly and continually, is this idea of connection, right? Working with people that you know, working with people that you like, having friendships at work, all of that. Stuff that happens when you see people every single day, right?
right.
And those relationships that happen because of it. And then what happens from those relationships is actually trust, and we get better work, we get more innovation, we get more creativity. But when people are not in the physical same space, even if they're talking over Zoom, but if they're
Mhm,
not in, they're not going to have that water cooler conversation that we all had pre 2020. There is a huge component of workplace satisfaction that is now missing. Now, is that
mm.
something that we can work and compensate for or design around? Absolutely. But there, nothing is perfect, unfortunately, is the long and the short answer.
So, Sherry submitted this earlier today, and she asked, how can managers maintain team cohesion and morale when everyone has different work schedules due to flexibility and perhaps are in different venues? What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
Well, there's been a bunch of work done by Dr. Martin Seligman and Gabriella Kellerman. They have a great book called, it's all about thriving at work and how do you thrive in this new, constantly changing workplace.
Mm,
And they specifically speak to this idea that how do people connect when everything is like asynchronous, right?
mhm,
Someone
mhm,
sends you an email at 6 a.m. You return the email at your 3 p.m, and nobody is working in the same mode, right? We're not
mhm,
connecting at the same time. So what managers need to hone in on is this idea that if you do want to foster connection on your teams, if you do want to foster these relationships and friendships, it's critical that people communicate synchronously, that people actually are either, and I'm going to say something crazy and provocative, that they actually talk on the telephone, which I
mhm.
know is shocking because none of us do that anymore. But picking up the phone and having a conversation in real time is a tremendous way that you can actually connect and you feel that you get to know the other person. And even, the way that we're talking here on Zoom is certainly better than this idea that everything is asynchronous. So, yes, there's a time and a place for asynchronous communication, right? Everyone sends a Slack and a this and a that. But as a manager, it has to be your focus that the team communicates at least some of the day. And I would like to say a majority of the day with synchronous communication.
Interesting. My mother often says too much of a good thing's not a good thing.
Yeah.
So you do need some diversification of experience, and that's, asynchronous is such a big thing right now
Yeah.
because people are burned out on Zoom, Zoom,
Hmm.
Zoom, and so they need head down time. But I think that gets confusing when we look at the fact that we may not be fully engaged with one another, and therein lies, the difficulties and the unhappiness that people feel.
Well, I mean, for me, I absolutely have Zoom fatigue. There are times when I'm like, I just can't do another Zoom, but I do a phone call. And I think it's great. I don't know why people don't do more phone calls.
I
It just,
agree.
it boggles the mind. It's like a piece of technology that people have forgotten. It's a great way to communicate, especially when we all have that Zoom fatigue. So absolutely. And this idea that, asynchronous, this working asynchronously and we need heads down work. I agree with you, but those are 2 different issues, at least in my opinion. I think that everybody in their day needs to block out time for that kind of deep work, right? The work that gives you satisfaction, the work that you feel that you're thinking, and it's like making you feel that you're making progress and accomplishing something. We all need to block out time in our day to do that because otherwise, God knows, we're all just jumping from, email to email, meeting to meeting, and you at the end of the day, you're like, what did I do with my day today? But asynchronous communication is different than the idea of doing deep work, right?
Mhm.
I this asynchronous communication needs to be minimized as much as we possibly can.
Well, balanced out
Yeah.
and made intentional. I wanna bring up Angela DeMarco's comment. She is a rising star on LinkedIn with a live show that she does, and she says, "I do believe that there can be virtual water cooler conversation as long as it's built into the culture." And it's to your point. Energy and vibes can be felt virtually. We proved it with our business. Well, congratulations, Angela, on that. That's great to hear.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely true. That's what I was saying. It's absolutely possible to foster
Mhm.
connection, virtually or in a hybrid situation or a hybrid environment, I should say. But you have to do it differently. Like it's not going to happen by accident. It's going to need some intentionality. It's going to need some strategy behind it. So it can happen. We just need some
Yeah.
different strategies to do it.
We got a couple of other comments that I've kind of paired together. I'm going to play them both and get your reaction to it. The first is from June. Hey, June. The execs that I report to would snicker at the need for happiness, but can achieving happiness in the workplace help to extend worker return on investment? And before you answer that, let me get to Bill, who asks, how do you engage with a skeptical C suite to get them to value workplace happiness? So we've got the value proposition aspect
Mhm,
that Bill is talking about, and the ROI aspect, which surely should resonate with the C suite
mhm.
trying to get more productivity out of their workplace. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, there certainly is a business case for workplace happiness.
Mhm.
And there's been a bunch of studies. The best one that I've seen recently is something out of Oxford that looked at the S&P 500 and actually looked at the S&P 100. And what they found was those organizations that reported higher levels of workplace satisfaction, there was an entire survey done with thousands of participants through Indeed.com. So that's
Mm,
how they determined what is workplace satisfaction. They found that though that the companies that reported higher levels of, let's call it, workplace happiness, workplace satisfaction, whatever it is, outperformed the S&P 500 by 13%. So that right there is telling you that when your workforce is engaged, connected, satisfied, doing work that they love, it always falls down to the bottom line. Now, there are a million more metrics that we can talk to about why workplace happiness, there's a business case for it, right?
mhm.
Um, one of them, a critical one, would be when people are satisfied and engaged at their work, they're 12 times more likely to recommend their organization to somebody else. Now, in this
Wow.
age, yeah, in this age where there's a talent shortage, where you can't retain people, the point is if you have people who are happy at your organization, they are 12 times more likely to recommend that organization to a friend, even if they leave the job, even after they leave the job. So the metrics
Wow.
are all there.
12
Lower
times.
absences, fewer mistakes, less sickness. I mean, it goes on and on. But I think that sometimes maybe it's not, it's the way that we pose the question to
Yeah.
those skeptics rather than saying, hey, we need workplace happiness. For me, I really think of happiness is the glue that holds our teams together. Happiness is the glue that's going to unlock the success, the resilience, the engagement. It's really, it's kind of shifting the perspective a little bit for those folks who are like, listen, happiness is not my problem and you deal with that, when you leave work. But actually it
Yeah.
is. It's the glue that holds it all together. It's the key to the success.
It's so interesting you should mention that, because I think framing is everything, the value framing that you bring to the C-suite. And Kelly brings up a comment that just makes me chuckle, but she says, I fear my company would respond to the need for workplace happiness by printing t-shirts for us
Right.
to wear. Hey, one step ahead of you, Kelly. Here we go. Best team ever. I
Right.
mean, I
Right.
talked to you in pre-show about my wife. She's a public school teacher. This is how a lot of workplaces respond to
Hmm.
a dire situation by let's get more swag. Let's celebrate our.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if how you feel about this. Is it
Well,
counterproductive?
100%. A
Yeah.
100%. We have moved past this idea that pizza parties and foosball tables and yoga classes are the key to workplace happiness.
Yeah.
That's not what we're talking about. It's not about more PTO. It's really about giving people benefits that are meaningful and
Mhm.
impactful to them. Right. So that's not about a t shirt. That's not about, hanging out, getting free lunch. That's not what this is about. This is much more deep seated. This is about giving people opportunities for learning and development. This is about giving people constant and continual feedback so that they know that their work matters and they understand their place on their team. Those are the benefits that we're talking about. We've long since moved past beanbag chairs and pool tables, and those companies that are doing that are going to be left in the dust.
I'm glad that Casey Angel is piping in here. A longtime friend of mine who says that's a great stat about the 12-time impact on workforce retention. I'm not entirely familiar with your workplace case, but I know you've done a lot to.
Well,
Uh,
this is that study comes from Gallup, actually,
yeah. Oh,
and I'm happy to provide citations to everything that
well,
I'm
if
talking
it's
about.
from Gallup, you can take it to the bank,
That's
because
right.
because the N of that survey sample is going to be huge,
Yeah, yeah.
and you'll be able to dig in by country or region of the world. Thank you, Casey, for that. Good to hear from you. This idea of happiness in the workplace is not new. I'm surprised that there's a novel nature to this discussion, and you must be kind of surprised by that too. When you and I first talked about getting you on What's Your Work Fit, I thought about when I think of a happy workplace, what comes to mind? And the first place that came to mind is Southwest Airlines, when the late great Herb Kelleher was its CEO. The guy was a character.
Right.
But he infused humor in everything, and it permeated the culture so that when bad things happened, they could ride through them.
Hmm.
Um, with a happy workplace, Herb scaled what was a small regional airline brand into a national carrier.
Hmm.
So there are a lot of examples that are not new. I mean, that goes back probably 40 years.
Yeah, and he embodied a lot of those principles that I was just talking about.
Mm,
Maybe didn't spell it out like this is about workplace happiness, but was certainly concerned about treating his employees wonderfully and being sure that everybody was respected, from the top all the way down to the bottom of the chain. There was like a really interesting story about Southwest where when people
yeah.
would go for an interview, and they would get picked up by a driver at the airport and driven to the hotel, and then they would check in at the hotel, and then the next day they would come to headquarters and they would speak to the receptionist, and then they'd be taken to their interview. Little did they know that their write up, right, their post interview write up included how they treated the driver, how
Right.
they treated the hotel check-in person, how they spoke to the receptionist at the building, right? Because those small interactions, right? That idea that every single interaction has to be infused with respect. That was something like that was a principle that Southwest embodied. And I just thought that was a really interesting way that they did that.
Do your clients pick up on that too as part of a recruitment strategy? Are they looking to see the subtleties of how candidates respond to people?
Sure.
Are they cheerful? Are they respectful? Are they
Yeah.
complimentary of the person who picks them up in the Uber?
Right. Well, I think it's not so much cheerful. I think it's respectful. I think
Yeah.
it's what the thing that I really help my teams with when they, talking about hiring and retention and turnover and all that stuff.
Yeah.
When we're talking about finding the right people for teams, I think that's something that maybe gets overlooked or doesn't get enough attention is this idea that it's critical that the manager of a team or the leader of a team understands everybody's strengths in the group, right?
Mhm.
So everyone's going to come to the group with strengths and weaknesses. The whole point is that it's a complementary collection. So when a new person is brought in and everybody talks about like behavior fit, like are they the right personality? I
Yeah.
think that the question goes by beyond that, and it's like what are their strengths and is that the right fit, is that a piece that we're missing? And I think that that's a really important piece when we talk about, I talk a lot about team happiness and fostering a culture of happiness on a team. That beginning piece is a critical one.
I spent a lot of my years in executive recruitment, as you know, and oftentimes team fit could become a pejorative. And what do I mean by that? We like the team just as it is. We want to replicate more of it.
Right.
Um, that doesn't necessarily help the bottom line. It doesn't necessarily help the team. Um, and it doesn't ensure the happiness of more people on the team. So, do you have any experience with helping your clients to dive to keep in mind not only ethnic diversity but experiential diversity
Sure.
so that um, it actually gets the team more people that they really need as opposed to more of what they already have that they
Yeah.
value?
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, it's talent diversity is the way that I
Yeah,
look at it, right?
yeah.
And like strength diversity. So, you might not understand this, but any woman listening to this will understand this. So, when we go to our closets or when we go shopping, I always buy the same thing. So,
Mm,
like I'm continually drawn to the same thing. So, in
mm.
my closet is like 20 pieces of exactly the same thing, but the one piece that I need, I never buy, right? Because I'm always drawn to the thing that A, I'm most comfortable with, B, I know well, so the same idea applies to a team, right? So
Yeah.
you're going to hire people that look like you, act like you, smell like you, whatever it
Mhm.
is, have the same experience as you, right? This is but this is even beyond this idea of like the diversity conversation. All this
Yeah.
is a critical piece. But I'm talking about it in terms of bringing in people with different kinds of strengths. So that I think is something that people don't really interview for. This is beyond skills. This is really like your talents, your gifts, the things that light you up. And I think that managers overlook that in interviews.
Well, and to your point, yes, they do. And to your point, I know that with my former clients, some of whom were Fortune 100 companies, we got them to the point of let's not talk about the team you love, but the problems that you need to overcome. So what
Exactly.
we would do in interviews with people that were there to recommend them for hiring was we would drill into pain points, situational dynamics. Okay. And it turns out in this particular company, which was in the database services space, they had some difficult clients that didn't respect the time of the people on the team. They would call off hours, they would call on weekends, they would change their requests, they would change the specs. And so we would look for the boiling point. More often, we would look for how is this person going to deal with a corporate 5-year-old and get them to the point where they were turned around and happy with the work that they were doing. Again, situational dynamics, which is to say, there is no necessarily right or wrong answer. We want to
Mhm.
see what you're going to be like in the trenches.
Yeah,
Have you had experience with
absolutely.
things like that?
Well, I think that, understanding, that's kind of goes to the style, how you interview people, right? And
Yeah.
how you really uncover what it is that they're good at. And that to me, or what how they would react in extreme situations. That to me always becomes obvious in like the subtle cues, right? So reading the body language, listening, really focusing in on the words that they choose, where their
Mhm.
emotions get heated. Like to me, that really starts to go. I love this stuff. Like I could spend all day doing this, but that's really where that comes out. It's not in like, oh, I worked at this company for 4 years and I worked. No,
Yeah.
it's all the under the surface stuff that you really uncover.
Stu brings up an XY graph here. He envisions a grid with flexibility on one axis and job stress on the other, inverted so that the worst jobs are high stress, low flexibility, but there is likely a compensational aspect to that as well. Yeah, I suppose people do get hired for very difficult jobs in difficult workplace environments from time to time. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I don't know if I agree with that because I'm thinking of I live in New York City, right? And
Mm,
I'm thinking of window washers, which I really can't think of a more stressful job than people who wash the windows on skyscrapers. And I
mm,
don't think they're getting compensated well enough.
yeah.
That feels stressful and that feels not flexible and it feels like they don't have a lot of compensation. But I know I mean I'm kind of, I'm being a little facetious. But I mean, I don't know. I don't think that there's an inverse relationship there. I don't think it's
Mm,
high stress necessarily high pay, or like it's not an inverse. It's a similar relationship. I don't think that. I don't think that like we can look at doctors, right? An emergency room doctor. There
mm.
can't be a more stressful job than that. I mean, doctors used to be compensated at great. I every doctor I talk to complains that they don't make money,
Well,
and nor do they have flexibility.
and they spend, I had a physician many years ago who complained about being an insurance broker.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So while I wish that were true, I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
true in certain situations. I don't think that there's like an even match for that. And I think that, speaking about, I'm like a huge junkie on research, so I'll always go back to the science. There's been and from Gallup again, it's this idea that workplace stress is actually it's growing incrementally every year. So we're now since 2020, I think that workplace stress has grown something like 15 to 17%. So you would think, see, this is where it goes back to this idea that if we
Mm.
have increased flexibility, why are we having increased stress, right? If we're having increased flexibility, we ideally are able to have better work life balance. We're able to pick the kids up from school. We're able to, do a walk in the middle of the day, which I'm a huge proponent of. But, why is workplace stress growing if we have all that flexibility? And what that says to me is it's a little bit more of a complicated question than that. Like flexibility and is not the whole answer. It's a piece, but it's not the whole thing.
Well, you wouldn't give a 16-year-old a driver's license without putting him through driver's ed. Ergo, with flexibility, we need to learn how to use it
Yes,
well.
yes,
And that, I think, is the problem. Apropos to nothing, 100 years ago when Western Electric introduced telephones that weren't black, but you can get them in designer colors. People were happy with it, but they were also stressed by the fact that they had so many choices and
right.
didn't necessarily know how to make a choice. I used to find this in when I was in the old direct marketing business. The more choice you gave people would would get them to react to you, often to purchase. It didn't necessarily mean it made it easier on them because you were now giving them options that they may not have fully thought out or
Yeah.
understood.
Yeah, and it makes the decision more difficult, right? It
Right.
becomes a more difficult decision to make. It's no longer, yes, send me the black phone. It's like, okay, I need a brown phone for the living room and or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, couple get to a couple more uh, uh, discussion points. Janine says, "I think that the level of happiness depends on where you are in your career, the type of work you do, and your overall maturity and discipline." I think that maybe applies. If older people just have a better idea of how to deal with flexibility. I know my daughter, who's 22, going to be 23 years old, desires more structure because she wants to learn how to work first. She wants to
Of
learn
course.
the job. She wants to be around people in the same room if at all possible.
Hmm.
And I think maybe as she gets older, and grows into the work better, some of these things might resonate a little better for her. The idea of workplace flexibility may come to the fore when she's 5 years older than she is now, 10 years older than she is now.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Well, what I'll say about this question is there have been studies that show that general overall happiness, not even
Hmm.
talking about workplace happiness,
Hmm.
um, goes up as we get older.
Hmm.
So from that perspective, absolutely yes, as we get older we are happier. But
Hmm.
the premise of the question was, and I'm reading into this, so forgive me, and if that's wrong, please forgive me. But what I'm reading into the question is, you're saying that, people who start their careers are sort of bound for workplace unhappiness and unsatisfaction, and we can't even start to think about being satisfied and happy in our work until we're in a more senior position. And that
Mm.
premise I have to totally disagree with, because the things that I talk about in terms of finding satisfaction and fulfillment with your work, which to me is a basic tenet of our overall happiness with our life, those things, it doesn't matter whether you're, wherever you are in the pecking order of an organization. These are all very basic human needs that people need from their job, no matter what you do, whether it's
Interesting.
manual labor or intellectual labor, or you're a receptionist or you are the CEO, or wherever you are on that organizational ladder. I think that workplace satisfaction and happiness is possible for everybody.
So I want to get to Marcus because this is an interesting topic, which is who should own, air quotes, happiness and become the chief happiness officer in a company. So should it be the CHRO?
Yeah. I actually don't think that there should be a chief happiness officer. I feel like for me, happiness, workplace happiness is really, it starts at an individual level. So it's
Hmm.
very much you have to drive your own happiness. And I think that the keepers of happiness, if we're going to talk about it in an organization, are team leaders and managers. So I think shifting this to HR, we're falling into that age old pattern of foosball tables and pizza parties. And that's not going to be it, right? We want to really focus on the stuff that really genuinely brings people satisfaction at work. And that's why I say it starts with yourself. So you're
Yeah.
your own chief happiness officer. But if it's going to be held in the hands of an organization, it's going to go from managers to team leaders. And that's where I say it should live. Because there's not, first of all, and it's also not a one size fits all. There are certain principles and premises that absolutely hold true, but then each team will have to start to develop their own pillars and foundations for this.
So you do the hard work, you bring the research, and I too love deep diving into Gallup and all the other research data banks that are driving workplace insight. And you work with your clients and you move the needle in a positive direction. The the building is happier, the workplace is happier,
Teams are
um,
humming.
teams are humming, and the little annoyances that would go from issues to problems to crises don't really flare up the way that they used to. What are some of the success stories that you are so proud of in the work that you've done to help companies get to this better place? And most importantly, the people that work for those companies.
Right. So usually, I mean, when we're doing case studies and we're trying to measure the results of a program that we've put in place, or
Yeah.
workshops or trainings, or I do a lot of keynote speaking, so that's a little bit more difficult to measure. That's kind of more like it kicks the ball in the right direction, but it's not
Mhm.
necessarily a long-term thing. Um the best way to measure happiness has nothing to do with happiness. Like, we're not going to measure how smiley you are and, how early you woke up in the morning and are you excited to get out of bed. We're going to
Yeah.
measure hard numbers, right?
Mhm.
We're going to look at, if you're a sales team, did your revenue go up? We're going
Mhm.
to look at, did we retain our talent over this year long cycle? Were we able to attract new talent. Like we're going to look at how bad, what was the situation with our healthcare costs? So was there a
Mm.
lot of sickness? Was there a lot of absences? The measures of happiness are cold hard facts, right? And my favorite measure is the first one that I mentioned, and that's revenue and sales and profit. Right? That's what I want to hear is going up as a result of being satisfied and happy and doing a great job. You always want to feel that, okay, my work has an impact. Like I'm growing this company and I love what I do. That's really where we start to look at it.
And the lifetime value of that happy employee who's invested in their own success and the success of the company is going to be far greater than the lifetime value of somebody that you have to go hire with
Yeah.
the related recruitment costs and so forth. And I
Yes.
say that at the peril of the business that I supported for 20 years.
No.
Often
It's very
people
true. I mean, it's like something like it's in the billions. I mean, the talent turnover, the cost of actually hiring. Because what happens is, I don't have to tell you this. People leave, they don't stay. Like there was some crazy statistic that when someone starts a new job, they leave within the first 30 days. Like 30% of the people are already thinking about leaving. Like that from that very first day. So yes, absolutely.
I had a friend on LinkedIn who quit a job after a week. She
Right.
couldn't take the toxicity of the new workplace that she entered into.
Sure.
Jessica, this has been so much fun. I wish we had more time.
Me too.
I want to get to the question that we ask all of our guests, which is, what's your work fit? What attribute, condition, experience, place, or state of mind makes the work that you do a wonderful part of your day, doing many wonderful and meaningful things, and not the all consuming time suck of a day? What's your work fit, Jessica?
So for me, the most important driver of my satisfaction at work, so my work fit, is to feel that I'm having an impact. So
Mm.
I need to know that my work is impactful. So I do my keynotes, and I like to know that I'm leaving people in a different place than when they sat down. Right. So that's it from that perspective. I do a lot of coaching work,
Mhm.
and that impact that I feel from my coaching work is immediate and wonderful. But I am a human being who needs to feel that my work matters and that it's impactful and it has positive consequences, throughout my life cycle of work.
This has been absolutely delightful. Thank you so much for joining us on What's Your Work Fit. Before we depart, I'm wondering if you could tell our viewers and listeners where they can learn more about you and perhaps even engage with you.
Sure. So I am on LinkedIn. So please connect with me on LinkedIn. And I am all over social media. So I am the Jessica Weiss on Instagram. I am the Jessica Weiss on TikTok. And you can find me on www.jessicaweiss.com is my website. So I think that will get you everywhere that you need to go. And certainly going to my website will get you to all those other places.
This has been this has been a thrill, and I hope we can get you back on at a future point to continue this discussion. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you, Dan.